What's going on, guys? Hey, we're back. We got a special video, man, because this is gonna be for somebody or from a channel of somebody that I know. He is the absolute goat here in Ukraine. His name is Colin Robertson, and he is a basically an independent journalist who is not afraid to get basically down and dirty. He goes to these European countries that are still buying, Russian oil and gas for whatever reason, and just confronts the people. They're like, "Hey, why are you buying this from a terrorist nation?" Right? He does all kinds of stuff. Just recently, he was recognized and awarded some kind of really cool award from President Zelensky in Kyiv. Man, I mean, like I said, he's the goat. So we're gonna watch his video. This is about a Russian missile that just hit Poland. And immediately when this happened, I released a post and I made a video about it. And so many people jumped in the comments and were like, "It hit a field. Who cares? It just hit some farmland. Who cares? It doesn't matter what it hit, or that it didn't hit a group of babies or something. I mean, obviously that would be way worse. But the whole entire point is that in a NATO nation, a ballistic missile just landed. This is the 12th violation just in Poland that Russia has committed since the beginning of the full-scale invasion in 2022. So we're gonna watch this. It's a shorter video, and then please make sure to go check out his channel, man. Like I said, he's the man. So look at the. I figured I'd put this up when I'm doing the intro now. Looks kind of cool, right? Um, Before we do jump into it, we have our anti-Putin social club t-shirts. You guys have been loving these already. They've only been out for a couple of days this month, and tons of you guys have already picked one up. So tons of love from me for that. Thank you. And also, I absolutely love the idea of you guys marching around your hometowns with this massive sign on your back that says anti-Putin social club. Like I'm thinking about some of you guys who have sent me photos, right? And you're like in central Idaho or the middle of Montana or something, right? And you've got anti-Putin social club on your back. That is so rad to me. So if you want one, pick one up. Discord, all our uncensored footage there for our members. Grab one. Um, Grab one. I mean, join the Discord if you want. We've been having drone threats all day, so you may hear some stuff in the background, but all right, guys. Hey, this is the channel down here in the corner. I'm not showing it very well. Down here, Colin Robertson. Check him out, please. I'll link him in the title and the description.
So a Russian missile has crashed into this field, and this isn't Ukraine, this is Poland. The Ukrainian border is about 100 kilometers that way. That's how far this missile got. Putin learned something this week. He tested NATO and he got his answer. A Russian cruise missile crashed right here into Poland and left a crater. Polish aircraft scrambled to shoot it down. There were statements, condemnations, but life here in Poland returned back to normal. And now, the news and the government here have all said that the Russians didn't intentionally target Poland, and yes, that might be true. However, after years of sabotage, damaged cables, incursions, Moscow has learned full well to watch what happens next, because this is exactly what it does. Russia applies pressure, it waits, and then it measures the reaction. And then, when that reaction fades, it applies a little more. And that's exactly how red lines disappear. Not in one big, dramatic moment, but slowly, quietly, one incident at a time. And the crazy part about all this is that Poland hasn't even called for Article 4. That's basically where NATO just comes together, sits in a meeting, and decides that something has happened. And they haven't triggered Article 5, which is actually coming together and agree that this was an attack. Nothing happened. No.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. And this is one of the reasons I get along with him so well, is he is very much on the same page of what is everybody doing, right? Why are more people not upset about this? And it's partially the war fatigue, right? Poland's like, yeah, it's just another one, and it probably was an accident, and but we'll watch this, and I won't pause it too much, right? So it's really important to hear what he has to say. But I do want to mention one of the comments that I got most often when I started talking about this missile in Poland was these Russian bots, of course, these Russian trolls start reminding everybody about the Ukrainian missile that was fired into Polish territory and killed a Polish civilian, I believe. Um, And they're like, so how about that? What about that? And this is, to me, this is an absolutely absurd argument because this is obviously an accident, right? Ukraine's not a bad acting nation. They're defending their territory. And the government of Poland and the rest of the EU very clearly saw that. They're like, it was an awful situation where that poor Polish person was killed. Terrible. But they also knew this was an accident, man. This was a very honest mistake. This was a very honest accident. Russia, even if it was an accident, has done so many deliberate violations, has made so many deliberate violations of the NATO treaty and the NATO allies. It doesn't matter if it was an accident or not, because it's another violation. It's another tally on their bad actor mark sheet, if you will. That comparison's absurd.
Calls for anything were made. 5 years ago, a Russian cruise missile crashing right here into NATO's territory would have been extraordinary. And now, it barely makes the 24-hour news cycle. And that is the real danger, because NATO's credibility doesn't depend on its ability to launch a wider war. It depends on its ability to make that war inconceivable. Because regardless of whether this missile was actually aiming for Poland, Putin can now see exactly what happens when part of his war enters NATO's territory. And to understand exactly what all this means, I spoke to Gabrielis Landsbergis. He served as Lithuania's foreign secretary from 2020 to 2024. And he believes that this missile wasn't just an accident, it was part of a test. Thank you so much for joining me. My first question is, was this a stray missile, or was Russia testing NATO?
We had 4 years of what we call the hybrid attacks against the eastern flank countries. And, let's look at how they went. For example, there was a period of cable cutting. Several cables were cut. Finland, Estonia, Lithuania affected. It was bizarre, out of nowhere. We didn't have that in the past. It all started with a full-scale invasion against Ukraine. So I don't need to be an intelligence officer to say, well, at least it's super weird that we're having exactly the same thing. Time and time again, it's as if Russia is testing us.
What do you think Putin learned from NATO's response to all of this?
He got the message, he got the right message. He tested whether somebody would make at least some noise in Brussels, in Washington, in Berlin, Paris, London. And now he tested that and he got the answer. Now we have a crater in Poland made by Russian missile. And I was wondering, what if it's a building? Is there a hope that then we will say, okay, this is it. This is a red line. And then, go a step further. What if there are people? What if it's a strategic object?
Dude, earlier this year, 22 Russian drones were in Polish airspace. This is just Poland. I'm not even talking about other nations that he has violated. Just Poland. And NATO did absolutely nothing. They scrambled some jets. They set up this coalition called Eastern Century or something. Basically, a group of these border Baltic countries that will scramble their jets when drones come into the air, but nothing substantial.
What if it's a strategic object that that big part of the country depends on? And so on and so forth. So where do we draw the line? If our message is just silence, timidity, trying to ignore this problem once again, it's just an invitation for Putin to continue that.
If a Russian missile leaving a crater in Poland is not enough for Article 4, what would be?
Cruise missile lands in Lithuania. What do? The first thing is you raise alarm. Right? You ask for Article 4, you ask the partners and allies to assemble in Brussels and let's talk it out. We promised not 1 inch of, every single inch of NATO will be defended. Not 1 inch will be given to Russia. This is more than 1 inch, so we already failed in this. And there is not even the minuscule step being taken. And I have to say this, there's a caveat because it's up to the country and it's up to Poland to decide whether they want Article 4.
Practically, what do you think NATO needs to do right now to stop another Russian missile hitting its territory?
You might remember a couple of years ago, like 3 years ago, French president said a very important thing. He said, we have to really consider if Putin breaks the front line and continues, forward into Ukraine, we really need to send troops into Ukraine.
This was the moment I became a fan of Macron. the president of France. When I heard this, it's the first time a European president, anybody, suggested putting boots on the ground, not even to fight Russia, but to help in the back lines, to help supply logistics, help in Western Ukraine, help evacuate civilians, whatever it is. But putting actual boots on the ground, he's the very first person, and to my knowledge, the only person who suggested it. I loved it. I was like, this is the man. Since then, he's done absolutely nothing. I've lost a lot of respect, but before, that was cool.
And Putin should know that if he closes in onto Odessa, he would find French troops there. But that tells me that there is thinking, or at least was thinking in leaders' minds, that there somewhere is red line, right? Which, if crossed, would require all of us to do something extraordinary that we have not done in the past. So draw a line somewhere and say, well, I mean, this cannot continue. You know, NATO countries cannot have ballistic missiles or cruise missiles falling down, potentially hurting people, potentially, you know, whatever infrastructure and so on. And that means we need to make a step.
Right now, I'm standing at the foot of a historic castle near Krakow. And Krakow, a city that survived one of the darkest periods of European history. Europe has spent 80 years building institutions to make sure that history can never repeat itself. And yet, 50 kilometers that way, there's now a crater left from a Russian cruise missile. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that NATO and Russia are suddenly at war. But it does mean that the distance between Russia's war and NATO's territory is now zero. Poland knows better than most other countries what happens when agreements aren't held. Because the question now isn't whether the war can reach NATO's borders, it's already here. And Poland has seen this before. In 1939, Germany invaded from the west, the Soviet Union from the east. Different ideologies for the exact same imperial belief. That borders are only strong enough for whoever wants to erase them. And history's most brutal lesson is this. Expansionist dictators don't stop because someone asked them to. They're stopped when they're made to understand that moving forward will cost them more than turning back. And that is deterrence. And yes, NATO is finally moving. At a summit this month, 70 billion euros was pledged for military aid to Ukraine. And that, in some ways, is progress. It shows that Russia's attempt to break up the West and destabilize institutions has failed. But this week, there's also a crater inside NATO, and that tells us something else. It's still not enough, because Russia is no longer fighting alone. They've got Iranian drones and missiles, North Korean troops, and Belarusian territory. And it looks like now Russia are preparing to bring in another 30,000 of those North Korean troops and do a new mass mobilization. Imagine World War II, you've got the Allies and the Axis, except one side is waging a war and the other can't decide if it's even happening. Last year, Putin stood on stage and he said every single foot that a Russian soldier has stood on is his. That includes here in Poland, where Soviet soldiers once stood. Putin launched this war because he believed that history chose him to rebuild an empire. And now, retreat for him means losing everything that he's built so far, every promise that he's made. And that actually makes this phase more dangerous, not less. Because declining empires can destroy an extraordinary amount before their leaders accept that it's declining. The Soviet Union only collapsed at the very end. Until then, it still had the power to terrify the Western world. Things can become much worse before they can become better. And that is exactly why the response to this crater matters. One of the clearest messages that NATO could possibly send would be to shoot down drones over Western Ukraine before they reach here in NATO's airspace. Close that part of the sky, protect NATO's border. Because what we do now determines what Putin tests next. Russia's war,
Hold on.
become much worse before they can become better. And that is exactly why the response to this crater matters. One of the clearest messages that NATO could possibly send would be to shoot down drones over Western Ukraine before they reach here in NATO's airspace.
This was an idea that I thought was genius, right? And genius, but so obvious, right? You don't have to put boots on the ground in Ukraine. You could just fly into Western Ukrainian airspace and help eliminate the drone threat that is killing civilians every single day here in Ukraine. And because we all know NATO is going to is too hesitant to put boots on the ground, it won't happen. Okay, how about in the air? How about just to help defend civilians? No. Those are Raphael jets right there. French Raphaels. And this was who was talking about doing it again, Macron. Nothing.
Be to shoot down drones over Western Ukraine before they reach here in NATO's airspace. Close that part of the sky, protect NATO's border. Because what we do now determines what Putin tests next. Russia's war isn't approaching Europe, it's already here. Over there, Krakow is peaceful. People are eating, they're laughing, they're playing in parks. And that peace is real. It exists because after the last catastrophe, Europe promised that force would never be allowed to redraw its borders. And history, it does repeat, just disguised as something smaller.
Yeah.
Something that can be ignored until tomorrow. And then, one day, tomorrow arrives.
Yeah. Preach, my boy. Make sure there's nothing at the end here we're missing. Okay. Oh my God, dude. Do you see now why, if you haven't seen this guy already, you see now why I love him, man? Just so on point. His history is accurate. His stance on defending Ukraine and the importance of it is extremely accurate. His stance on NATO failing is accurate. Please go check out his channel, man. This guy is doing the Lord's work right now. Literally, he's doing so much to help Ukraine. It's very good, and he's got a very big audience. So that's great. We'll leave it at that. We'll keep this a shorter video, you guys. I am curious though what you think about NATO in the comments below. Should NATO stay hands off and just continue supporting from the sidelines, sending supplies, sending resources, and stay out of Ukraine? You think NATO should be more hands-on? Let me know. I love you guys. We'll see you in the next one.